Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I will be targeting black bass from the banks of New Melones Reservoir. The weather these last few weeks had been relatively warm and this had moved a lot of these ditch pickles up into the shallows. Originally today, I was scouting for some carp and catfish in order to do some warm water fishing, but there are a few and far in between, so I will target ditch pickles today. This first wave of fish that had moved into the shallows are rather skittish, so I will have my trusty old drop shot rig on and I'll be fishing this with some robo worms, the 4-inch color, and I'll also have a tungsten jig made by Kitech, the compact one specifically. I'll be fishing this on a medium casting setup. Earlier in the day, I was scouting for some carp and catfish in hopes of finding those fish in numbers, but I was unable to locate them with the rising water, and with the relatively cold water still, I believe a large portion of them weren't up in the shallows yet, or in numbers at least. But what I did notice was a large amount of black bass, or specifically these ditch pickles, roaming the shallows. With the warm weather we've been having here in the valley for the last few weeks, a lot of these ditch pickles are becoming increasingly aggressive. I ended up getting a bite and I knew right away that there was a fish on in this shallow water. The water was stupid clear and I could see a lot of these ditch pickles roaming the shallows. I am targeting waters anywhere from 3 to 12 feet of water and sometimes maybe about 15 feet at most. Most of these ditch pickles in the shallows are kinda skittish though, mostly because I believe with these shallow water fish, these guys are easy pickings, so they often get a lot of pressure immediately. The goal today is to target the shallow water near these marinas. I am targeting these hard bottom area in the shallows near the marina because what I've noticed is there are a lot of fish schooled up in this shallow water. I ended up losing this fish however though, but that's okay, they were bunched here quite tightly. After losing that first fish, I noticed that the school ended up spooking, so they moved off the marina a little bit, but that's okay. All I'm doing is firing this drop shot out in the direction that I believe these fish are moving in, and just slowly letting it hit the bottom, and then afterward just giving it gentle shakes. Currently here in the Central Valley, we've been having some warmer weather than usual, especially for this time of year. We've had some cold front come in, but not as bad as usual, and with that being said, a lot of things are picking up, and it is looking like we are going to have an early spring this year again. I know that there are a lot of folks out there who are eagerly awaiting the arrival of spring. There are quite a handful of guys that are tired of seeing the cold water fishing content, and I get it. Spring is around the corner, and there are a lot of folks dying of cabin fever. However, I am scouting today in hopes that there are some warm water species that are slowly moving up with this warmer weather we've been having. As my bait approached the bank, I noticed that a fish ended up breaking away from the pod and picked up the bait. This was a very nice spotted bass. Contrary to popular beliefs, these spotted bass are quite cold water tolerant, so they'll often be the first fish to move up into the shallows, unlike their largemouth cousins. As I've mentioned already in many of my previous episodes, whenever targeting spotted bass, where an angler catches one spotted bass often means there's more than a few in the same areas. These fish will often travel in quite a big group, and by catching one, an angler can maximize their catch by casting it out and often catching another one in the same area. While reeling up this fish, I did notice that there was another fish with him, so I will quickly unhook this guy and I'll show him to you guys real quick so I could fire out the other rod I have and see if I can catch that fish as well. I did end up hooking this fish quite well, and this was a very nice cookie cutter size spotted bass, very typical for New Melones Reservoir. I'll show him to you guys real quick and I'll let him return to the water. I picked up my casting rod, which I have my compact tungsten Kitech jig on with a twin tail hula grub as the trailer. I did bring some small swim baits today, but what happened was when I got to the reservoir, I realized that I left the jig heads for the small paddle tail swim baits back at home. So with that being said, I didn't have much moving baits with me because originally today I was going to scout for carp and catfish. This time of year, what will happen is with the warmer weather, the first group of fish that will move into the shallows will tend to be carp, and I really wanted to see if I can get a carp campaign going. However, today, much to my disappointment, I couldn't find enough of them in numbers. But luckily, with the warmer weather we've been having here in the valley region, these black bass are slowly starting to flood the shallows. So with that being said, without the carp and catfish that I was expecting to slowly move up into the shallows, I did manage to target these black bass because I did bring some bass fishing gear today. A second spotted bass appeared and he ended up smoking the jig right in front of me. This wasn't a big fish, but I'll take what I can get, especially with these fish being kind of skittish because I believe a large portion of these guys were hit quite hard with a jerkbait. By far the two most popular baits in my local area are the Megabass 110 jerkbait and the umbrella rig. With these fish being the first wave to move up into the shallows, these fish will often see those lures in quite heavy numbers. So with that being said, I much rather prefer a slower approach to pick up what I can, especially since I'm fishing from the bank. This wasn't exactly a really big spotted bass, but I'll take what I can get. It was a very healthy, chunky cookie cutter size spotted bass. These guys fight so hard, especially during this time of year as the water is slowly warming up. Alright buddy, off you go. One of my favorite areas to target this time of year are often man-made structure like marinas and docks near hard bottom. These areas will often draw these first wave of shallow water fish in my opinion, and they are often the easiest areas for bank anglers to target. As a bank angler, I am going to target what's in front of me, especially whenever I'm walking the bank. More times than not, a lot of these fish are faced near the bank, especially during this time of year. So therefore, I want to maximize the number of bites I can get near me first. Despite the clear water, what a lot of bank anglers will do this time of year is they'll often cast out as far as they can. Yes, that can work if there are structure out there, but in this particular situation, I ended up getting a bite really close to me because the structure was literally right in front of me. This fish was posted up in about 5 feet of water right in front of me underneath that dock. If I were to have cast it out further, I wouldn't have been able to catch this fish immediately. So therefore, whenever a bank angler is targeting the bank, I would really like to make my first cast as close to the bank as possible, because an angler shouldn't dismiss the shallow water, especially near structure. I did end up, however, spooking the group of fish that was here, because once I got this fish close to the bank, I noticed that the rest of them ended up bolting away from the dock. This fish showed all the telltale signs that he was feeding near the bottom on crawfish. As the lake water level rises, a lot of crawfish will get flushed out, and these fish will feed on them quite aggressively. I'll show them to you guys real quick, and I'll return them back to the water. As the late afternoon approaches, I swapped out the jig for a free rig. The goal of the free rig today is to let me explore out a little bit further to see whether or not these fish are slowly becoming much more active. There is a boat dock in front of me, so with the free rig, and the biggest advantage of it is I can slowly let this bait hit the bottom and just hop it back aggressively or slowly, give or take the tempo of the fish. More times than not, what I find is a lot of these docks will often sit near a ramp, which the ramp itself will be hard bottom, and with the hard bottom, a lot of these spotted bass really love the hard bottom, so they'll often get right up into the shallow as about 3 to 5 feet of water. Hopefully with this warmer weather we've been having, I am hoping that the warmer weather will hold so a lot of other warm water species will move up into the shallows. Hopefully this warmer weather lasts just a few more weeks and we should have quite a bit of warm water species up in the shallows. I know that there is a cold front coming in this next week, but I don't think it will reset the bite half as bad as a lot of folks think it will do. Based on my observation of everything that was going on, I think an early spring is on its way. We might have an early spring in a few weeks here, despite a cold front moving through next week. To my pleasant surprise, a spotted bass came out of nowhere and smoked the bait right in front of me. This wasn't a big fish, but I'll take whatever I can get this time of day. With this warmer weather, I really wanted to toss a paddle tail swim bait, but unfortunately I did bring the soft plastic swim bait but forgot the jig head because the primary goal today was to scout for carp and catfish, so I'll fish with what I can get. This wasn't exactly a big guy, but I'll show him to you guys real quick because he was another very nice cookie cutter size spotted bass. These spotted bass are gorgeous in my opinion. They're so full of colors this time of year, and I'll return him back to the water. As the day drew to a close, I really wanted to target the shallow back bays where a lot of these boats were being moored to see if any fish had moved into the shallow back portion. Now this particular area did require me to make a further cast because the piece of structure was a lot much further out. However, this back bay was very shallow, no deeper than 10 feet at most. I am looking for some shallow water fish in hopes that maybe there are some fish that had moved into the shallow at this later part of the day. New Melones Reservoir is rising steadily, but it is still quite low in my opinion. This particular area is slowly rising as well, and what I've noticed today was a lot of these spotted bass were pushing the shallow water because I think they were feeding on the crawfish, not so much on bait fish, but crawfish that were getting flushed out of these grassy areas. I did notice when coming down the hill that there were a handful of carp in this area sunbathing. But whenever a carp are sunbathing, they will often not feed because more times than not from my past experience with sunbathing carp, a lot of those fish will often just sit there and not move a whole lot. I ended up getting a bite right in front of me because out of nowhere, another spotted bass ended up picking up the bait. This fish actually caught me by surprise because I was busy eyeballing the carp that were near the buoy. Despite fishing for bass today, I am on the lookout in hopes that there are a large concentration of carp slowly moving up into the shallows. This time of year, my preference though is to fish for carp when I can. Unlike black bass or catfish or even panfish, a carp feeding window in the spring period will be a lot much shorter compared to those other species because as they move into the spawn, they will not feed during the spawn, so catching them during the pre-spawn gives me an early advantage. I ended up landing this very nice spotted bass and he showed me the telltale sign that he was here in the shallow feeding on the crawfish that were getting flushed out from this fresh grass. This was another very healthy cookie cutter spotted bass. He was a very plump little guy, very full body nonetheless. I'll show him to you guys real quick and I'll return him back to the water. Alright dude, thanks for playing and off you go. The sun was setting soon, but I wanted to see if I can catch one more fish because I did notice that there were a few fish here in this very shallow water, no deeper than 3 feet. But I was getting torn apart by the mosquitoes that were slowly starting to come out. There was 3 fish in here and I really wanted to see if I can get one of them to commit and bite. However, one of the fish looked like somebody broke off a pretty large swim bait on him. So I don't think that fish will bite, but I believe the other 2 should bite because they looked pretty aggressive hunting this shallow water. With the warmer weather we've been having lately, there are a lot of these black bass up in the shallows as the reservoir is slowly rising as well. So therefore, I guess I will target these fish for a while until the carp get much more active and then I can really commit to a carp campaign. I did notice that there were carp today, but not enough and not concentrated in numbers to be worth targeting. Typically this time of year, New Melones Reservoir will also have some trout roaming the shallow water with the spotted bass, but I didn't notice any today. Another fish ended up committing to the bait, and I knew right away I caught myself one of the 3 spotted bass that were in this area. I will land this fish and I will call it quits for the day because the mosquitoes were relentless. A quick tip I want to give a lot of bank anglers this time of year is if you are wandering around the tall fresh grass that are around the reservoir, I highly recommend you guys put on some tick repellent. Today I had quite a bit of tick repellent on me, but despite the repellent I had, there were still quite a handful of ticks that did manage to get on my legs. Even though I was wearing heavy jeans as covering, the ticks were relentless as well. So I just want to put that out there for the guys that are wandering and beating the banks this time of year. To my surprise, this was actually the bigger fish out of the 3 I ended up seeing in this area. I will land this fish real quick and I will call it quits for the day. Today was quite a good day despite the setback I had earlier in the morning scouting for catfish and carp. I'm just glad that the ditch pickles were at least participating today. This was one healthy chunky spotted bass, and I'll show him to you guys real quick. He was very healthy nonetheless, very bright, very full of colors, and very hefty. Alright buddy, thanks for playing, and off you go. Overall, it was just a wonderful day out here at beautiful New Melones Reservoir. Spring is on its way, and I did manage to catch a handful of black bass for the camera today, despite not finding any carp or catfish. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.